Welcome to the Todd DeVoe Show, exploring the best ideas and lessons for leaders.
Good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are at in this fine world. And today, I'm excited. This book here, it's called Sisters in the Brotherhood by Cindie Schooner-Ball, is a very interesting read. Cool ideas here that, when I was a young man, there weren't a lot of women in firefighting. It's getting, obviously, more and more today. And Cindie is one of the female firefighters who really paved the way for this. And excited to have Cindie on the show today and talking about her book and what it means and a little bit more than that. So Cindie, welcome to the Todd DeVoe Show.
Well, thank you, Todd. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited to talk with you about my book.
Absolutely. Yeah, so let's talk about the firefighting career the path that you took. Back in the 70s and 80s, I don't know how many female firefighters there were in the country, but I'm sure that you're probably like one of the few. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, I believe back in the day, I got hired in 1987, and nationally, I think 3% or less were women. Today, it's still a small amount, but luckily, the career is attracting more females. So, but back in the day, it was pretty rare.
Well, I've seen some stuff on LinkedIn and through the press that there's a few cities now that have like all female houses, which is kind of
yes. I was really lucky. Actually, I was lucky to show up when I was a captain and had an all female crew. It was exciting. It was fun. It was definitely eye-catching. Competent young women. I was really proud to be on the truck with them, and just we had a great time. We laughed, and it just was a different vibe.
Absolutely. So, you say here in your book, it's called the title of it is Sister in a Brotherhood, and so as most people know or can at least figure out just by watching things that in public safety, law enforcement, firefighting is very brotherhood related, right? We talk about the thin red line, thin blue line, those type of things.
Right.
What's it mean to break in and be the one, like the only female in the house, or going through those steps?
It was just, I was so excited to make it through the process because, as you know, you don't just show up and they put you on a truck. You have to get your state license, your certification in order to even start testing for different departments. And back in the day, you tested individually for each department, which involved, a series of written and practical exams, and you get put on a list. And back in that day, there were a lot of people competing for one or two slots. And so that was the process. I tested for a year. And then when I got hired, we had 5.5 weeks of boot camp, and there were two women, as I talk about, myself and the other woman. And she was a triathlete. She was fierce. And, we had 5.5 weeks. And as you know, you're a probie the first year. You're tested every, I think, couple of months by a different officer. And at the end of the year, and up until that year, the final test, you could be fired at the drop of a hat. So it was both men and women. It wasn't, of course, just for women. Right. But, it was fun. We laughed. We laughed so much in the beginning of my career. And I remember just feeling very protected, but also I was lucky enough to work with a crew of men that they showed me the ropes and taught me, that you check out every single piece of equipment on that truck. Your air pack is number one, of course, because that's your lifeline, but you never get lazy, which I was older. I was 30. I knew that. And I had an excellent work ethic anyway, which I think is so important. And I was like a sponge, and I learned, and they kind of forced me out there when I talk about, the chief and different calls I ran. It's like, come on, you can do it. Let's do it. So they gave me a lot of confidence. Not to say that there wasn't probably behind, closed doors, some apprehension among men, or, they might have said things, but, I really didn't let that bother me, because I wasn't there I was there because I truly wanted to pursue the career and do it to the best of my abilities.
No, and, that's the thing too, is like when you go through that process and understand the why behind it, and not fight it, I think it makes you a better person in general. Like I remember when I went through, when we had to, as a probie, we'd pull the fire truck out onto the tarmac, and this is from upstate New York, so anytime it went outside the if the garage door went up and the barn door went up and you pull the truck out, you bring it back in, you have to wash it, right? Because of salt.
Absolutely.
And things like this,
Yeah.
right? And doing so, as the probie guy, you're the guy that had to do it, right? But then you had to go through each piece of equipment, because then you're learning your truck, right? You're
Yes.
learning that I was on a truck, not on an engine. I was on a rescue,
Okay.
and so you're learning that vehicle, right?
Yes.
Whether it's the engine,
Inside
the
and
truck, or the ladder, or whatever the thing is, upside down. Absolutely. So like when you're under stress, is that how you felt about it, or did you feel that it was hazing?
It wasn't hazing at all. Like I said, it every morning at shift change, when we were on shift, the shift that was getting off duty was responsible for, of course, putting the station in order and washing the trucks for the oncoming shift, which was my shift. And we were responsible for, compartment by compartment, starting as a probie, compartment by compartment, learning everything in each compartment. At the time, I wasn't a paramedic. So, we did have medical gear. We were EMTs and had basically medical gear, but everything from top to bottom, I learned along with the other guys. Obviously, I was in a house and I was the probie. They were teaching me. And that was just from the beginning. And then, of course, we would have training on the different tools and what were they. The most important thing I could say is, when you're on a call and the officer calls for a tool, he or she never wants to hear the banging of the compartment doors, because you can't find it. You don't know where it's at. Right. And that is I learned that early on, and some people, look, when I was an officer, they would write it down, and if you had to write it down, you write it down. We had, when I first started, which they don't do anymore, or at least they didn't do, is we had to, when we were getting off duty, we not only had to wash all the vehicles, we had to wash the chief's truck. We had, battalion chiefs, so we had their vehicles. We had to wash all them up. We had to take them and gas them. And then we had a flag. We had a battalion chief. He was on a different shift, but he was from New York, and he got hurt. He retired and became a battalion chief with our department. But we had a ritual. I know that was a running joke. I know you know what I'm talking about. But we had a flag, and every morning, that flag, we'd go out there and raise the flag, and then every night before sunset, you'd see us out on this busy road. It was kind of funny when I think about it now. We'd go out there, we'd lower the flag, and we'd properly, fold it and fold it into the triangle, and take it and put it in its place inside the station. And we just had different traditions like that. We always ate together. That was the thing. We didn't have diets back then per se. It was like, no. And then you're always the one to get up first and get up first and start cleaning up. And then we had chores. And as a probie, if you're really smart, you do all those chores without being asked. Then they assign them. But in the beginning, it was kind of like, hey, you do this, I'll do that. And like I said, I was really fortunate. And I don't know, because I had older chiefs, but I had, I worked with younger guys, and everybody it was good. I did have a lieutenant at the time that he didn't care what time of day or what day of the week it was. If something needed to be cleaned or the hose needed to be repacked because it just didn't look right, you were out there doing it. And I remember one night I was sleeping because I'd go to bed early, and I was sleeping, and he decided he was going to pull all large diameter 4-inch hose off the hose bed and repack it because it just didn't look right. So he had the other two guys out there with him, and they're like, well, where is Cindie? And he goes, oh, she's sleeping. They're like, oh, no. Oh, hell no. Oh, no. We're not doing it without her. And so here they come. They woke me up. Get out there. You're part of the crew. And it was those kind of things that were great.
What drew you to the profession?
Well, I never grew up thinking I wanted to be a firefighter. I talk in my book, it's kind of did a 360 because I talk in my book when my brother and I were growing up. I was 6 and he was 12 and a half. My parents, I grew up in poverty, and they didn't have any money for Christmas presents. So the fire department came to our house and I got my first doll, a Chatty Cathy doll. I was 6 and a half and I was 6, my brother was 12 and a half, and he got a bowling set. So I always looked back at that and went, But really what drew me to the profession is I had a job at the week club. I worked in, weighted tables. I was in banking in high school. And then I started modeling in my early 20s. So I did everything. I had a boyfriend who I met at 17 and we started living together, and he became a forest ranger. And one of the guys said to him, you need to become a firefighter. So he went to fire school, and I'd go and visit him at the fire station. I love to work out. I started working out, jumping rope, running when I was 22, and I just fell in love with it. And so I was always doing the races in the area and kept myself physically fit. I'd go in and see him and look cute at the fire station with all the guys, and that the girlfriends, wives come in and you sit at the table and you're like, ooh, I'm with all these guys. And the chief said to me, you need to become a firefighter. And I looked at him like, you're crazy. But, I was at a point where I was in my late 20s, mid 20s. And I was just kind of like, man, what am I going to do? I can't see myself working as a secretary my whole life or bank teller. I used to say, I'm going to be that person on the high rise in downtown Fort Lauderdale with my nose pressed up against the glass, looking out at the ocean going, man, what's life? What is this all about? Is that all there is? And so what I did is, I had that in the back of my mind. And then as the wheels of fate, and I talk about it in my book, I'm sure you don't know, my boyfriend and I were just, we were 12 years together. I was 17 years old. He was 6.5 years older than me. And we were just, we were just growing apart of what our life expectations were. And so he basically said, you're out of here. My sister flew in from Texas, grabbed me, went home, went to Texas, hated Texas. Sorry, Texans. There's nice people in Texas, but it's not the state for me for a lot of different reasons. I missed palm trees and sand.
Right.
And so anyway, I came back. I saved up money and came back and worked as a secretary, and then said, I'm going to go to the unemployment office because I can't do this. I got fired about a week before my vacation. What am I going to do? I'm almost, I'm 29. What am I going to do? So I saw a sign, and it said, if you're an American Indian, call this number. And I was like, oh, I'm not doing that. I was ashamed. My great grandfather was full-blooded Mohawk, and my father, and it was just a point of contention. It was something I was ashamed of. And I hate saying it, but it was honest. I was ashamed of it. I had a note my mother had left me in a drawer that was my great grandfather back. He had an X that he had to have notarized stating he was a full-blooded Mohawk Indian. His parents had died in the early 1800s. His mother, he never knew his mother. His father told him that when he was a boy, he was dead. And it was notarized. And I had this letter in this drawer. And so I thought, I never really admitted I was an Indian. At the time, I did have dark hair. But I went and I called I called the number. It was a Seminole Indian reservation in Hollywood, Florida. Met up with a counselor there. She was not of Indian descent, but wonderful. And when I told her I wanted to be a firefighter, she almost fell off the chair. And I told her I was really interested in it. I couldn't afford the $100 for fire school. And so that started the ball rolling. That's when I signed up with the Fire Academy and got my fire certification, tested for a year, and got hired with Broward County, which is Broward Sheriff Fire Rescue now, And I never looked back. It was the best. It was a lottery ticket, in my opinion, and I earned it, but it was a lottery ticket. I have so much passion even now and respect and just I'm kind of protective of the fire service. I really believe it's an important it's just a fantastic job.
There's been a lot of changes over the years, in the fire service. Some good, some bad. I've actually seen this during your career. How has the impact been not the impact, but how has those changes impacted your view of the fire service or the view of the future of the fire service?
I've seen and I saw changes later in my career, particularly as I rose up through the ranks. And I've actually talked to women that are currently on the job as well as those who left the profession. I think it's generational change. I welcome the young people, but I still, and we talked about it earlier, I feel I was taught that the fire service is a paramilitary operation, and it's that way for a number of reasons. Because when push comes to shove and decisions need to be made and lives are at stake, somebody has to be in charge. Now, it doesn't mean that if you see something, say something, but if it's at the time that something needs to be done, that's the officer's decision. I've also seen where I felt females, or I've seen where people who had no experience with the fire rescue service, they saw a fire truck go by, they signed up for the training. Most of them were in later years wanted to be paramedics, and they didn't really want to be firefighters. But in most departments now, you have to be dual certified. They weren't prepared, probably in a number of ways, and probably I used to mentor young females, young males as well. And the problems that I would see with them was, in my opinion, they got too familiar with two hands, too familiar. And I did have a couple of firefighters that are dear friends of mine said, Cindie, you know what we loved about you is you weren't that. I didn't go up and hug everybody. I always said, I'm not giving anybody a big smooch when I meet them unless it's my husband. And if somebody wanted to, I'd put up my hand to shake people's hands. Not to say that I didn't get close to guys, because, you live together, you work these calls together, and you see each other a lot, and then you say, hey, how you doing? And you give it, a hug. But I didn't do that with everyone. I found some of the males would come to me and say, listen, they're putting me in kind of a precarious position here because I don't even really know her, and she's coming in and she's new and she's giving me a hug, or she's sitting on my lap, or she's, and I would have to say, hey, you can't do that. Yeah. That is not appropriate behavior. And, there was a point in time where we didn't have separate bathrooms. There was right. Or we had 2 bathrooms, and I'd tell the guys there'd be 8 guys and 1 woman. I'd say, listen, let me get my stuff together. You can, of course, use that bathroom. That's crazy. There's 8 of you and 1 of me. Just let me get my things. And I would, always put my things, I would fold them up and put them in a corner, because I didn't want them spread out. And I would have sometimes guys would come to me and go, you go in there and she's got her bra hanging from the thing, and I don't really know how to deal with that. And I'm like, these are personal things when people live together 24 hours
right.
or more that I just feel like you have to be aware of. And it's not a bad thing. It's not, earth shattering, but I feel like men and women, particularly of this generation, some of the young men, I think they get, you need to kind of have a little bit more, be a little bit more standoffish and really not, earn your keep, but really be a little bit more selective in your behavior.
Yeah, it sounds like a generation, definitely generational. That's one of the things. I think people today in general, not any specific generation, but just people today in general, are afraid to earn, not afraid, are impatient to earn their stripes, if you will, and they take things personal, like, hey, you're dismissing me. I have a lot of good information, but yet you're making me do, the filing or the copying or whatever at the office, and it's like everybody had to start there and come up,
Yes,
So speaking of that, though, you met your husband on the job, right?
I did.
How did that go over? Like, tell that story. I'd love to hear the personal story.
Well, it was kind of a crazy story, but he was in the station, the first station. But when I first saw him, I was going through boot camp. We call it death camp. And he was in charge of delivering green telephone poles to the fire academy for us to stop and chop. So I wasn't really fond of seeing him then. But when I pulled my little, once we completed our training and we were going to go on shift after the 5.5 weeks, this is how primitive it was back in the day. The training, the battalion chief put every shift, A, B, and C shift in a hat. And you had to pull it out of the hat to see what shift you were going to be on. So I pulled it out and it was A, alpha shift. And that happened to be the shift he was on and the station he was in. And so, we were friends. I mean, he had been in the Coast Guard. He was 18 years old and then got hired at the fire department 26. So he had been around and done some stuff. And, we were really just friends, but there was that chemistry. I said it's instantaneous combustion right from the beginning, but I was like, no, I'm not doing this, and he was the same way. And in the meantime, the boyfriend that had left me decided he wanted to try again because now I had a real job. And so I said, yeah, we'll try it again. He was a good guy. I'm not dissing him like that. He was a good guy, but you grow up. You're not the same person at 30 that you are at 17.
Right.
And so, it was funny. I was going to EMT school and there was just this smoldering attraction, it's like you're looking at a hurricane and it's going to come, but you're just trying to turn your head and avoid it and not even think about it. And, so anyway, my boyfriend would go visit his parents up in New York all the time because he had Kelly days and all that. So He went up to see his parents. I was at the end of EMT school, and I had never in my entire life been driven to the Keys by myself. So I drove to the Keys. I finished EMT school. He drove me to Miami. Mark did, my husband. He drove me to Miami to take my test because I wasn't familiar with Miami. And passed the test, and we went to dinner. And he dropped me off. He was a perfect gentleman. Dropped me off at my house and peck on the cheek and see you on shift. And I just happened to drop the hint. I'm going to the Keys for the weekend. I've got money now. I have a real paycheck. I can actually. I booked a hotel. I can buy a really good dinner. I'm just so excited. So I'll never forget the feeling. And I say it in the book. It was intoxicating after being poor and then going through all this training and finally finding this absolutely wonderful career. I was so happy. And here I am in this Jeep, with the top down, the sides out, and I'm driving down and all you see is this turquoise, beautiful water on both sides and smelling the salt air. And I booked a little room and I'm laying out. And next thing I know, I look up and I said, there he is, standing there at the foot of my chair with a fishing pole in his hand. Said, I thought I'd come down and do some fishing. I'm like, okay. Well, from then on, we were pretty much inseparable. And probably the cat was out of the bag when we used to go to it was like a county specific place to get our paychecks. That was before, they just email. So the cat was out of the bag and we got separated, which was good. I didn't want to work with him then, and he didn't want to work with me, but we would run calls together and we ran fires together. And, I had a policy. I never went up to him, never hugged him, never touched him. We were very professional, and that's how we did our career.
So that's pretty smart. I mean, so the department obviously, said, hey, you guys can't work together, but you guys can still be, on the same shift, but just different houses, right? Is
right.
That basically?
Right.
And so, excuse me. So was there any issue between any of the other team members on the any other firefighters that were on the shift with you guys, or was there any scuttlebutt going on about that kind of stuff, or was it pretty much all handled quietly?
It was handled pretty well because, you know, it wasn't like he was married and we were fooling around. It wasn't like that. We were both single people. And of course, you know, I believe truly that once we became an item, it was very healthy for us not to be working in the same station, because that does cause, and there were actually married, you know, people, paramedics back in the day that were on the same truck or working together. And I thought, oh my God, I couldn't stand it. You know, I could not stand that. That's too much togetherness for me. And, but, you know, that there were couples that were together, but basically, you know, there were the only thing probably is later on he would say things to him, maybe like, well, I wouldn't want my wife to be a firefighter. And, you know, once we were married, and he's just such a cool guy that he's like, what do I care, man? You know, she's going up through the ranks, making more money than I'm making. You know, what would I care? I mean, I met her on the job, and that was the thing. I met you on the job. You know exactly what I was going to do, and so it was easy. And then, you know, the guys were great because we didn't have any family that we were going to have a wedding, so I took my $300 wedding dress, and we flew to Jamaica, got married on the beach at Sandals, and came back and threw a big old party, all the firefighters, you know, and us. And I had a wedding cake. I have a picture of it in the book of us dancing. And that was it. And we'll be married. It'll be, actually, I will tell you this. We dated for a year and we lived together for a year. I said, I'm not doing that. And then we'll be married 33 years, February 23rd.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So last question here, because the reason why we got the conversation into the relationship is because, you know, when you're working under stress, under pressures, and things like this, we do develop relationships with each other and whatnot, you know. And so I think that's a critical question, regardless if it's however the relationship bonds. Now one of the things that, you know, we talk about here specifically, you know, in the field of fire, police, emergency management, public safety in general, is really trying to encourage more women to get into the field, because diversity is great. What advice would you give to somebody who's trying to break into any of those fields, you know, in the public safety or into any other male-dominated field, to the women that are trying to break into those fields, or not, I should say break in, but get into it like everybody else, get the job?
Sure. I would tell them to do your homework. I would tell them to have your honesty be your guiding light with whatever career, whether it be police department or fire rescue or any male dominated. Go in with integrity. Draw your line in the sand of what you think is going to be what's going to be appropriate to you and what is not. And just go in there and say, hey, I'm here, and prepare physically and mentally for whatever it is that the profession requires. But go into it with a positive attitude, because I will tell you, most people, and I will tell you, most men that I met, they were wonderful, as long as I wasn't gonna, as long as they didn't feel like they had to do my job and their job too. But they knew, and they knew I was tough. They knew I was competent. So I would say to females, be tough, be confident, be fair, but continue education, continue training, but be proud of being a female. You're not a male. Be proud of being a female. And be proud to be an asset to such a great profession. But on the flip side, don't play the woman card. Don't be afraid to ask for help when it's genuinely needed, or advice of like, I was the least mechanically inclined person you would ever meet in your life. But I learned because I listened. I listened to guys that tried to teach me. Everybody but my husband, we would fight about it. So he couldn't teach me. But everybody else could. But I would crawl underneath the trucks when I was, driver engineer. When I was kept upgrading, I would put on those goggles and get on the creeper and crawl underneath, and gloves, and I would check all those fluids. I would, you know what it's like. You have to operate the pumps and the tools. That's a whole different. I say being a driver engineer it's difficult. but, just learn. And I was always going to school. I probably went to school because I had that drive and that hunger that I wanted to promote. And so, I was always looking at, the next thing, training for this, training for that. And then, of course, I had to become a paramedic. We were on the job 15 years, and fire and rescue merged.
Right.
And so in order to really move up the ranks, and I was always curious about medicine. I liked being an EMT. I loved patient care, didn't want to be a nurse, didn't get into the job to be a paramedic, but that was fulfilling for me in another way.
Right.
And just be prepared to be training all the time and go for it and know that you genuinely make a difference in people's lives.
Last question, Sister in a Brotherhood. How do I find this book?
You can find the book on Amazon. I also have a website, sisterinAbrotherhood.com, and it will direct you to ordering that book, Amazon.com. I'm doing a couple of pop-ups around, but basically Amazon.com, or go on my website and it'll direct you to where you can order it. If you're not Amazon, if you have it has Kindle, you can reach Book Nook, or if you have Apple, it will direct you to the proper place to order it, no matter what.
And all that information is down in the show notes, son. If you're driving and your pencil's not sharp, no fret. Just go to the show notes. You can click on the link down there and get to Cindie's book. Hey, Cindie, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for reaching out. And it's been truly a pleasure talking with you, Todd. Absolutely. I hope it's not the last time. Hope we get to speak again.
For sure. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining us for today. I also forgot to, in the beginning, to thank Dan Scott for filling in for me last week. The COVID really just knocked me out, and I do appreciate everybody's support on that. And Dan, thank you again for stepping in when I really couldn't talk that well. Until next week, everybody, please stay safe. Oh, one last thing. Please go to your favorite podcast player and share it and give us a rating. And I'd love to have that support. And until next week, stay safe, stay hydrated.